What happens when a chill Texan Oscar winner sits across from one of the fieriest voices in daytime TV, and neither is willing to back down? Stick around, because this one goes from chill to wildfire in a matter of minutes. Before we hit the flames, make sure to subscribe to Showdowns and hit that like button for more epic talk show deep dives. The cameras roll. The studio is buzzing with electricity. Matthew McConaughey struts out to a roaring standing ovation, flashing his signature smile, offering that familiar nod as if he just walked into a room of his closest friends. He hugs Whoopi, shakes hands down the row, and then lands beside Joy Behar. There's a quick smile there, polite and professional, but noticeably measured. Whoopi leans in, setting the scene. All right. We have Matthew McConaughey joining us at the table today. The crowd goes wild again. Matthew chuckles, leaning back in his chair. I guess I'll never escape that line, huh? But before he can settle in, Joy jumps in. You shouldn't want to. It pays the bills. The audience gives a chuckle. It's been good to me, I won't lie. But here's where the mood begins to shift. Whoopi lays down a more serious tone, bringing up his recent books, speeches, and advocacy. You've found yourself engaged in some pretty serious conversations lately, she states. Matthew nods, his demeanor shifting to one of focused intention. When you've got a platform, it comes with the responsibility to use it, and I always try to approach it with an attitude of listening first. But when the conversation veers toward the political divide, the pleasant facade begins to fray. Matthew leans in. I feel like we're in an argument about proving the other side wrong instead of listening, and I'm not necessarily pointing a finger at one side or the other. I'm saying, us all. Can unity survive at this table? Joy Behar doesn't think so. Her head tilts, her eyes sharpening. But Matthew, with all due respect, sometimes one side is just wrong. A few people in the audience clap, and the energy in the room spikes. Matthew's smile is a little more measured now, his voice even. See, that's the kind of language that keeps us stuck. Joy doesn't miss a beat. Or that's the language that calls out what's factually wrong. A whoosh rippled through the audience. Whoopi steps in, raising a hand. Let's keep it friendly here, ladies. The debate, however, had already begun. Matthew keeps his cool, but holds his ground. I'm not saying you don't stand up for what you believe in, but I don't think we should start by labeling entire groups of people as wrong because we stop listening to one another. Joy leans in. But what if that's not about opinion? What if that's about human rights? What if that's about reality? This is no longer a conversation about Hollywood's golden boy promoting his latest project. This is a collision of perspectives. Matthew nods. Then you tackle the issue head on. You don't attack the people. Joy shakes her head, her dismissive gesture clear. That sounds all nice and good. That sounds like something you say on the Texas porch. But in politics, that's not what happens. Are we losing our ability to have reasonable discussions? Or is this a conversation we desperately need to be having? Matthew chuckles, but the humor doesn't reach his eyes. Maybe that's part of the problem. Whoopi, realizing the segment has taken on a life of its own, exclaims, Okay, we're 2 minutes in and we're already there. Matthew turns to Joy with one final powerful question. Do you not think that we've gotten too comfortable vilifying people? Joy's answer is immediate and cutting. I think we've gotten too comfortable saying there are two sides to every issue and that they're both equal, because that's not what's going on. The credits may not have rolled yet, but the Texas porch chat is definitely over. A roar goes up from the crowd, the air in the room thick with attention you could cut with a knife. Sunny Hostin interrupts, her tone measured, but the question biting. Matthew, when you say unity, critics are saying you're dodging accountability. How do you respond to that? There's no pause, not a millisecond. Accountability is vital, he answers immediately. But unity does not mean we can gloss over when somebody's done something wrong. Unity is when we figure out how to move forward without knocking the whole house down. But Joy Behar comes in with a wrecking ball. She crosses her arms and leans into it. But what if part of the house needs to come down? The audience roars a cacophony of applause, nervous murmurs. The gravity of the moment descends, palpable. McConaughey pauses again, even longer than the last time, and the silence hangs heavy in the studio. Then you rebuild, he finally says. but you don't burn down the whole thing. Joy Behar smiles tightly and glares at him. That's very poetic. McConaughey doesn't blink. I'm not trying to be poetic, I'm trying to be practical. Can an A-list Hollywood star bridge this kind of divide, or is he completely out of his depth? Whoopi Goldberg senses the temperature rising and tries to anchor the room back to reality. All right, let's talk about the rumors. At one point, it was even rumored that you were thinking of running for office. That sent a buzz through the country. McConaughey laughs a flash of the old familiar charm. That sure did. But Joy Behar won't let it go. People wanted to know what you stand for. So let's get this straight. Both sides right now are equally responsible for the divide in this country. The studio goes completely dead. You can hear a pin drop as all eyes fall on McConaughey. His words come, surgical and precise. I believe leadership across the board has failed to listen. Joy shakes her head immediately, her patience wearing thin. That's not an answer. A tremor of tension shivers through the table. McConaughey's smile disappears. The charm evaporates, leaving only a cold, steady resolve. It is an answer, he says firmly. It's just not the one that you're looking for. The studio explodes. Gasps and cheers erupt from the audience. This is no longer just a chat show. This is a debate of substance. Whoopi leans forward, hands held up, trying to regain control. All right, let's not step on each other's toes. Joy raises an eyebrow, a rebellious spark in her eyes. I'm not stepping on his toes. I'm asking him to elaborate. McConaughey stays focused and centered. And the elaboration is that if we keep blaming the other side, then we are ignoring the culture that enables that divisiveness. Joy Behar is quick to retort. Or we can acknowledge the dangerous rhetoric. Then call out the rhetoric, he snaps back, but don't condemn the voter. Sonny Hostin looks intrigued, the stark difference in their perspectives now plain for all to see. So you're distinguishing between leadership and the people? McConaughey nods. Yes, absolutely. But Joy Behar leans back, watching him as if he's a puzzle that continues to elude her. But if people continue to vote for toxic leadership, aren't they also part of the equation? The room goes silent again. McConaughey pauses and looks at the sheer complexity of the situation. People vote for all sorts of reasons: fear, hope, loyalty. Sometimes misinformation, sometimes just pure frustration. Writing those people off does not solve anything. Joy's comeback is instantaneous. And it doesn't excuse anything either. Whoopi Goldberg scans the faces in the audience, the intensity of the discussion evident on her own features. You know, this is exactly why these discussions are so important. McConaughey nods, but the air remains charged. Joy Behar gives a short, sharp laugh. See, there's something we agree on. The audience laughs, and for a fleeting moment, the pressure subsides. But it's a brief reprieve. Joy Behar leans back in again. I just worry that your message, while positive in nature, is being used to gloss over a need for accountability. McConaughey's tone shifts, becoming sharper, more decisive, his final thought cutting through the air like a gavel. And I worry that the outrage culture is preventing the necessary conversations. The atmosphere is transformed. The playful back and forth is over. This isn't just a disagreement, this is a battle for the very essence of dialogue itself. Joy nods slowly. Because method matters. Matthew also nods, and the argument finally has a clear center. Right. Whoopi allows a hesitant smile and surveys the table. Well, we certainly have hit a raw nerve this morning. A few nervous chuckles ripple through the studio, but the tension is still palpable. Joy observes Matthew intently and then asks with both curiosity and challenge, "You're incredibly calm about this." Matthew just shrugs his shoulders, and his reply seems to come from the depths of some deeply rooted philosophy. I've learned when you raise your voice, people stop listening. But Joy's not listening to a whisper. Sometimes you have to raise your voice to be heard. The studio audience explodes into applause, which, if possible, becomes even louder and feeds the fire. Matthew looks Joy directly in the eyes without flinching. Or it can make people defensive. A thick silence descends upon the table. The cameras pan in tight on the two icons battling ideologies. Whoopi clears her throat and attempts to diffuse the situation. All right, we're barely getting started and you can feel it. This isn't a polite promotional visit. This is serious. This is complicated and neither side is about to budge. Whoopi takes a slow breath with a faint smile into the camera and says, "Clearly we're not starting slow." The audience laughter in the seats is strained, and the temperature in the room at the table has been dialed up a few notches, and everybody knows it. Matthew sinks lower into his seat, leaning into the fray. I'm not afraid of hard discussions, but I believe they are more productive when we're not always assuming the absolute worst about one another. Joy is ready with a truth bomb of her own. But Matthew, the absolute worst is exactly what is sometimes happening. Applause surges in the studio again. Matthew doesn't miss a beat. Then, if that's the case, we must stand firm in what we know to be true. I'm not going to argue with you about that. Joy leans further toward Matthew, her voice sharp. But you continuously throw out these notions of both sides that feel awfully like they're just too convenient. The audience lets out a low murmur. Matthew tilts his head a bit, his voice curious yet firm. Convenient for whom? For people that don't want to face what is actually going on, Joy fires back. Unity or unwillingness to look facts in the face? Sunny cuts to the chase with a more precise question. Let's go with specific arguments. You've argued that we must meet in the middle. What if one side absolutely refuses to meet in the middle? Then you keep showing up, Matthew says instantly. Joy laughs in disbelief. That sounds rather idealistic. It sounds persistent. Matthew corrects her calmly. Whoopi eyes Matthew with interest. You really believe that people's minds can be changed through sheer persistence? Matthew nods and draws upon a lifetime of evidence. I've witnessed this work in families, in communities, and in business alike. People change their minds when they feel heard. But Joy continues to argue every point. Or they stand their ground and dig their heels in further. The audience begins to split with some people nodding and some applauding. Matthew lowers his voice and says to Joy, "That can happen also, but I believe if you expect everybody to dig their heels in, then what are we even here doing talking?" Joy tightens up her face again. We are here talking because you must sometimes stand on principle regardless of the other side. I have no problem understanding that the best way for us to make progress is to stand on what we know to be right. The applause grows immense again, but Matthew doesn't flinch at all. Standing on your principles is not contradictory to listening. Joy delivers the knockout blow. They can be, in fact, when the people on the other side are in the process of actively subverting our democracy. The room falls silent. The word democracy hangs in the air above them, and the muscles in Matthew's jaw clench, not in anger, but in what seems like sheer grave solemnity. If our democracy is being undermined, it must be defended through established procedures, through law, and through our vote. We cannot demonize a part of the country. Joy shakes her head and drops her voice to a whisper that booms across the studio. Part of the country did not storm the Capitol building. And it's over. They've crossed the Rubicon. The audience reacts with a mixture of gasps, tentative applause, and disbelief. Matthew raises his hand gently and says in a calm but firm voice, "I condemned that act immediately." Joy continues to push and seeks a declaration of his stance, but many did not. And those that did should be held responsible, Matthew says. His voice gaining a steely resolve that takes the room by surprise. Some people in the audience begin to clap and a glimmer of understanding crosses the faces around the table. Sunny leans in, posing a final question for the moment. So you're clear on that? Absolutely, he replies, letting his voice sink into a register of utter certainty. Violence is not acceptable in any form that harms democracy. Period. Joy nods, but she is not satisfied. She wants a very specific admission. So why not state explicitly, certain political groups are dangerous? Matthew pauses. There's a beat of held breath in the studio audience. He isn't thinking of what to say. He's considering the impact of his next sentence. Because when you say a certain group is dangerous, he begins slowly. Then you're saying everyone in that group is lost. I didn't say that, Joy interjects. It's what's implied. He shoots back, his steady voice acting as an anchor against her spark, his tone in direct contrast. The audience hums and lets out a scattered applause. Whoopi jumps in, hands outstretched as if trying to separate two boxers. Let's just try to keep it constructive. Joy keeps her eyes locked on Matthew. I'm trying to keep it constructive. I'm trying to define terms. Matthew leans forward, asking the question that underlies the entire gulf between them. Joy, do you think people can change? Yes, she responds without missing a beat. But they have to admit fault first. And how do they admit fault? He asks. By being confronted with the truth, Joy answers. Matthew nods slowly, a flicker of a knowing smile playing on his lips. And truth doesn't land very well with contempt. That hits the room like a physical blow. The silence descends and then breaks into a low, rhythmic clapping. Joy's expression shifts, her fire still evident, but now honed to a sharp, precise edge. You're saying I'm speaking with contempt? Matthew shakes his head. I think our culture now speaks with contempt, on both sides. Joy leans back and lets out a sigh. There it is, the both sides speech. It is what it is, he says calmly. A few nervous laughs from the audience members who feel we've reached the peak of their intellectual chess match. But is outrage a weapon or a tool? Sonny Hostin chimes in, wading through the fray, trying to bridge the two. Do you think outrage is something that's needed in politics, Matthew? Yes, he says without hesitation. Joy's eyebrows shoot up. Really? Of course, he continues. Outrage is usually the first indicator that something is wrong. Joy nods, a rare agreement, and then he drives home the punchline. But outrage isn't the solution. The crowd responds with a roar. Joy folds her hands and lowers her voice, her tone shifting from animated to deadly serious. Matthew, for some people outrage is the fight for their own survival. His expression softens again. I respect that, he says, the sincerity in his voice palpable, shifting the room's focus from a debate to something resembling a deeply felt exchange. But if rage is the only language you speak, then you aren't building anything new. Her reply comes with a quiet but sharp edge. And if we speak only calm, we validate injustice. The statement hangs in the air, heavy and unresolved. Whoopi glances between them, realizing this is no longer about policy. This is about the human spirit. I am not telling anyone to stay silent in the face of injustice, Matthew says, his voice rising slightly. I am asking what comes after outrage. The answer comes instantly. Organizing, pushing for change. Joy answers. And to push for change, he asks, you have to get people on board. Joy shakes her head, her gaze locked on his. Not everybody. The audience explodes. This is the loudest they've been all morning. Matthew leans back, a glimpse of the intense energy usually reserved for the big screen. This is where we fundamentally disagree. Joy meets his stare. There are no more smiles. The banter has ended. This is real. This is raw. This is deeply honest. Sonny looks at Whoopi, her breath caught. This is getting so good. Whoopi nods, looking directly at the camera as if to capture this moment for history. It is. And it is great. Matthew shifts slightly and turns his attention more towards the audience. Listen, I am not here to defend bad actors. I am here to say that dehumanizing millions of people isn't solving this problem. Joy is not giving an inch. And ignoring the patterns of harm isn't solving it either. Matthew nods, with a tone matching hers. Then let's call out that harm specifically. Joy shoots back, we do. But Matthew hits her gently and directly. And then sometimes we go too far. There is a hum from the audience. This has reached a breaking point. Joy, raising her voice. You feel like we go too far? Matthew, with an unwavering look. Sometimes. Yes. The room reacts vocally. This is the point where the filter comes completely off. Whoopi raises her hands to calm the storm. Okay. We are going to take a breath. But tension is high enough to cut with a knife, even as she speaks. Joy's eyes look directly at Matthew, and her voice holds the weight of years of being on the receiving end. It's very easy to talk about unity when it's not you being targeted. There is a soft gasp from the room. That one was a doozy. How does a world-famous star react to being hit with that truth? He doesn't lash out. He takes it, nods. I've had my fair share of criticism, he begins but is cut off by Joy. That's not the same thing. Matthew stops, his voice lowering in the room's suddenly palpable sincerity. No, it is not, and I'm not going to pretend like it is. The atmosphere changes again, from a tense antagonism to a heavy, quiet respect. Sunny is watching intensely, leaning in. So where is the line then, Matthew? Where does unity end and accountability begin? They should occur simultaneously, Matthew answers. Joy sighs as if she's heard it all before. In theory. In practice, Matthew asserts. The audience applauds, but Joy's expression is an impassive mask of doubt. That sounds lovely in a podcast. It is not in practice. Matthew smiles slightly. Reality's a bit messy. Joy nods. It is. There's a beat of charged silence, longer than live TV can usually sustain. You feel the heat through the screen. Neither man is backing down, nor are they yelling. The controlled intensity is devastating. Whoopi glances up at the clock. We are not done with this. There's nervous laughter. You feel something big is being built. This has now ceased to be about celebrity soundbites. It is about how we are responsible for the words we use and the context of the times we live in. Whoopi shifts, leaning forward and looking between the two powerful voices. All right, we are still here. Nobody has stormed out. The laughter brings a brief reprieve. Matthew cracks a small smile. Not my style, Joy replies instantly. Not mine either. However, the tension remains. Sunny leans in, digging deep. Matthew, I want to follow up on what Joy said. When communities feel as though their very existence is being threatened by a narrative to tell them to reach across the aisle, that can really feel dismissive. Do you understand that? I do. Matthew nods without hesitation. And I am in no way telling people that they need to stifle their pain. Joy counters immediately. But you are telling them to moderate it. Matthew turns back to her, his voice even. I am telling people to be strategic. Strategic? Joy incredulously. Why strategic? If your goal is to effect change, you must ask what is actually going to do that, Matthew argues. Joy, without a trace of doubt. Pressure. A scattering of applause for that from the audience. However, Matthew offers a parting thought. Pressure coupled with persuasion. Joy shakes her head. And how many people do you think will be persuaded? Matthew's reply is calm, measured, and unnerving. How many do you think won't be? The room erupts in sharp claps and low murmurs, but Whoopi intervenes, stopping the circular talk. Let's get real and be specific, she says, her voice commanding the table, her attention on Matthew. If you were giving advice to leaders today, in this environment, what would you tell them? Matthew answers without hesitation. I'd tell them that they need to spend less time performing for their base and more time listening to the people who didn't vote for them. Joy nods, a rare expression of agreement on her face. Okay, that's fair. Matthew continues. And I'd tell the voters to hold our leaders accountable without dehumanizing their neighbors. But Matthew, Joy is ready with a sharp reply. Some leaders thrive on divisiveness. Some leaders do not want unity. Then we vote them out, he states simply. If the system works, Joy shoots back, her tone laced with skepticism. The crowd's reaction is immediate, sensing a more fundamental debate about democracy playing out between the two panelists. Matthew's tone hardens as he responds, Then we make the system work, but we don't concede that conversation doesn't matter. Joy tilts her head slightly. You actually think conversation can repair the level of polarization that we have today? I think conversation is the only thing that has sustainable potential to repair it, he says firmly. Is there a point where conversation isn't enough? Sunny shifts the focus to what feels like the bottom line. What about consequences? Necessary, Matthew says immediately. For everyone? Joy questions, her gaze locked on him. Anyone who breaks the law or incites violence, he answers. Joy pushes, wanting to draw a clear line in the sand. And if that includes people in the highest echelons of power? Yes, he replies with no pause. The room's atmosphere palpably shifts. A few loud, distinct claps can be heard. Joy studies him, searching for the slightest crack. So you're not wavering on that, No, he says flatly. I'm not. Whoopi leans back, a thoughtful look on her face. I think there's a difference here between tone and substance. Joy disagrees. Tone affects substance. Matthew nods. And so my tone has to match the message that I want to send. So if my tone is fiery, then people are just reacting to the fire instead of the message. Joy gives a short, tight smile. Some people say it's too safe. A chuckle goes through the crowd. Matthew laughs lightly. Maybe. But I've found if you come in hot, they shut down. Joy's voice rises in a burst of energy. But if you come in soft, they don't know there's urgency. The audience is now firmly on the edge of their seats, a heated exchange over styles and approaches to a fractured nation unfolding. Sunny tries to frame the divide as a generational one. Is it generational, Sunny? Is it different eras of activism? Joy jumps in first. Perhaps. I come from an era where you had to shout. Matthew nods respectfully. And I appreciate that. But I live in an era where everybody is shouting. The crowd roars in approval. Joy pauses, allowing the comment to sink in. That's true, she concedes. Matthew continues. In an era where everybody is shouting, sometimes the only thing that cuts through is a quiet voice. Or it gets drowned out, Joy counters. Matthew offers a slight smile. Not if you're consistent. More applause. Whoopi leans back, observing the two panelists with curiosity. I'm realizing an interesting thing here. You two don't seem to be disagreeing on values. We disagree on tactics, Joy says. That's correct, Matthew confirms. Sunny then asks the question on many viewers' minds. Joy, are you concerned about writing off large segments of voters? Joy lets out a deep breath before choosing her words carefully. I don't dismiss people out of hand, but I don't sugarcoat behavior either. Matthew's reply is calm and direct. There is a difference between not sugarcoating and shutting the door. Joy's eyes narrow. Are you suggesting I'm shutting the door? I'm suggesting that sometimes the conversation does, he answers carefully. For now, the door remains ajar, but as the cameras linger on their faces, it's clear that the debate about the path forward is just beginning. Stick with us as we continue to break down this showdown everyone is talking about. Joy leans back and shifts her weight as she understands the importance of the moment. Matthew's voice becomes softer, calming the entire room. You continue to open the aperture further because this goes beyond just this table. The audience goes silent in a weighty expectation. The tension continues to change as Joy's tone becomes less sharp and much more personal. Let me ask you this. In all sincerity, are you ever afraid that your push for unity leaves the people at the margins feeling ignored? This question lands much differently. Matthew takes a deep breath and answers immediately with a raw yes. The sheer honesty surprises. And so for that reason, I try to listen rather than talk when I'm out in those spaces, he says, and Joy slowly nods, although not convinced. Listening is important, but at some point you have to be on a side. Matthew looks directly into her eyes when he delivers a line that I'm sure will become famous. I pick sides on issues, not people. The audience erupts into the loudest applause. Yet that day, the studio is actually shaking. Joy seems taken aback and says, "That's a powerful line." Matthew responds with quiet humility, "That's not a line. That's how I live my life." Is it possible for someone to truly divorce political conviction from humanity? Sunny brings back the conversation. Politics forces issues into sides, and Matthew confirms, yes, they do, and we should not let them define our entire being. Joy is relentless. For some people, rights are their identity. And I stand for their rights to be protected, Matthew responds forcefully. Joy looks at him as though assessing his character for common ground and says, perhaps the difference between us isn't as vast as it sounds. Matthew allows a small smile to form, and a hint of that Texas drawl returns. Perhaps it's just louder. The audience bursts into laughter and Whoopi giggles. You see? We're getting somewhere. Yet the tension doesn't vanish. It morphs. Joy says, I still believe there are situations where anger is justified. To her astonishment, he agrees. I agree. You do? She asks, surprised. Yes, he says. Anger means that it's important. If anger is your entire being, it's impossible to build a coalition. The room goes quiet and thoughtful. The noise fades from loud celebration to intense listening. Joy taps the table. Coalitions require compromise. Yes, he answers. And sometimes compromise feels like a betrayal, she says. If you betray your core values, it's a betrayal, Matthew calmly states. The energy here has moved beyond the electrifying to complex and layered. This is the clash of two humans who believe in justice in equal measure, but from different vantage points, and Matthew doesn't shrink. Whoopi looks down the line of guests, realizing this might be an unprecedented moment on live television. We have one more segment here. The audience murmurs in anticipation. Joy looks directly at Matthew. I'll give you this. I admire that you aren't deflecting. A lot of people in your shoes would. The crowd claps at her words. Matthew nods. I came on to talk about the movie and I can't let that end that way. I want to talk. The audience applauds, and Sunny chimes in. I think viewers are watching at home and saying this is not rehearsed. And Joy half smiles. It's very much live. Laughter echoes through the studio, but Whoopi steers them back in the final question. Matthew, given what Joy has said here today, has any part of this changed your perspective? Matthew pauses. This is not the Hollywood pause. This is a real moment of thought. I think it solidifies that experience informs your perspective, he says as silence falls. When your rights feel like they're at risk, it's easy for unity to be an abstract word, and hearing it from someone who is not afraid to express their pain helped me to understand that. Joy nods. But Matthew has more to say. He gives a final, solid remark. But I do believe that if we stop trying to humanize each other, nothing we do will create real change long term. The lights dim to bring us out for a commercial break, with an unspoken question in the minds of everyone in the studio and every viewer watching at home. Is humanity enough? A ripple of applause starts. It isn't loud and booming like I would have thought, but a deep, resonant wave. Joy responds gracefully, her voice with finality. And I believe if we don't call out harm clearly and loudly, we normalize it. Another part of the audience erupts into applause, separating me from the rest. Whoopi smiles. I think she hears it as well, and she says, "Here we go again." Matthew laughs quietly. Maybe, but I think we understand each other better now. Joy smiles with her eyes. I think we do. There is a definite shift now. The anger in both of us still remains, but now it has smoothed. Neither one relented, but each understood the intent behind the other's words. Sunny looks to Joy to get the final word. So, you don't think his message trivializes responsibility? Joy takes a beat, then answers. I don't think he intends for it to. Sometimes the effect can be that intent matters. Matthew quickly says, and the effect does too. So, I get that. The audience once again applauds for the interaction. Whoopi looks at the crowd and says, Boy, you guys are vocal today. One lady yells out from the back, We love the debate! And the audience erupts with laughter and cheers. Matthew laughs at the crowd and looks at the audience. This is exactly what I'm talking about. We can disagree and still be in the same room. Joy gives a nod. On that, I can agree. As the segment concludes, Whoopi thanks Matthew for his time. The audience stands for a slow clap. Not the frantic roar of the crowd after a hit movie, but something solid, almost reverent. Matthew shakes everyone's hand, and then, at the end of it all, he reaches Joy and pauses for a fraction of a second. It's not awkward, just a quiet acknowledgement. Thanks for having me back, she says softly. So softly only the microphone picks it up. I'll be back, he smiles. The camera fades and, like always, the conversation is far from over. Minutes after, the news hits. Clips of Joy saying, half the country did not storm the Capitol, and Matthew's response, I choose sides on issues, not on humanity, goes viral. And simultaneously, the world splits in two. On one side of the internet, Joy is hailed for not letting the unity message fly by without first condemning the hurt caused, and on the other side, Matthew is celebrated for maintaining a calm and dignified demeanor and not dismissing millions of people. Hashtag McConaughey on the View and hashtag Unity Debate Flood. Social media. And a debate about what the exchange really was commences. Most political analysts believe that was the most significant moment of debate that show has ever witnessed, while other analysts say that it was the perfect embodiment of a divided nation, caught up in its emotional starting points. Later that day, a hazy clip emerges backstage and captures Matthew and Joy still in conversation. Not heated, not accusatory. They just keep talking. The clip helps ease the rage of some of the audience who have been already so quick to choose sides. The next morning, the headlines blare. McConaughey and Behar clash over unity and responsibility, but neither one reacts by defending themselves or issuing any sort of statement. Matthew tweets a simple, "Dialogue matters. Appreciate the conversation." And Joy on the next day's broadcast says, "We disagreed, that's what we do here." And he was a good sport to stick around and take on any question. The thing that was remarkable about the debate was not the passion, but the resilience of those two to sit in a room together and try to tackle it, even when disagreement was inevitable, because they wanted to. There was no winning in the argument, but the fight itself seemed to mean everything to both of them. I think in this segment we see how real the struggle really is. How many times have you seen arguments that are so charged that no progress can be made on either side because you are arguing just to argue and not to really discuss the issue? We ask, can these people still debate without yelling? Is it possible for our country to work with one another? And we want to hear from you. Do you think Matthew's message of unity is a step forward? Or do you agree with Joy that accountability is primary? Join the conversation below, and don't forget to subscribe to Showdowns.